The rain fell in sheets that evening, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected neon. James Wilson pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders, the fabric already soaked through. His shift at the diner had ended an hour ago, but he'd stayed behind to clean the grease traps for extra cash. Every dollar counted when you were a single father with mounting bills and a son who needed medicine. As he trudged through the downpour, a voice called out from beneath the awning of a closed boutique. "Excuse me, sir. Can you walk us home?" If you've ever wondered whether small acts of kindness can change your life forever, this story will show you just how powerful compassion can be. Before we dive deeper into James's incredible journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the good in humanity. The woman stood with 4 girls huddled around her, all wearing expensive-looking raincoats that seemed out of place in this part of town. Something about their vulnerable posture made James pause despite his exhaustion. He had his own child waiting at home with the elderly neighbor who watched him after school, but he couldn't bring himself to walk away from this family caught in the storm. "Where do you live?" he asked, stepping under the awning. "Oakwood Heights," the woman replied, her voice soft but clear above the drumming rain. "Our driver had an emergency, and I left my phone at home this morning." James's heart sank. Oakwood Heights was nearly 30 blocks away, in the wealthiest part of the city. Walking them there would add at least an hour to his journey home. An hour his son would spend wondering where his father was. An hour the kind but frail Mrs. Abernathy would have to stay late, again. "I'm sorry, he began, but stopped when he saw the youngest girl shiver. She couldn't have been more than 5, with wide eyes that reminded him painfully of his own son, Ethan. "Actually, I can take you. Let me just make a quick call first." The woman smiled gratefully, and something in that smile made the weight on James's shoulders feel a little lighter. James had always been the type of man who believed in doing the right thing, even when life hadn't done right by him. 3 years ago, his wife Lisa had died after a brief battle with cancer, leaving him alone to raise their son. The medical bills had forced him to sell their modest home and move to a small apartment in a neighborhood where the rent was cheap but the streets weren't always safe. He'd taken the job at the diner despite having a degree in engineering because it offered flexible hours that allowed him to be there for Ethan. As they began their walk through the rain, James held his umbrella over the woman and her daughters as best he could, leaving himself exposed to the elements. The woman introduced herself as Catherine Morgan, and her daughters as Emma, Sophia, Olivia, and little Lily. They chatted as they walked, and James found himself opening up about Ethan, about his late wife, about the struggles of making ends meet while trying to be both mother and father to a child who deserved so much more than life had given him. "Ethan has asthma," James explained, helping little Lily over a puddle. "The medication is expensive, and our insurance only covers part of it. But we manage. He's a tough kid." Catherine listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest rather than pity. There was something refreshing about her directness, the way she didn't shy away from the harsh realities of his situation but didn't treat him like a charity case either. "What did you do before the diner?" she asked as they turned onto a street lined with increasingly upscale shops. "I was a structural engineer," James replied, surprised by the twinge of pride he still felt saying those words. "Specialized in sustainable building designs. But after Lisa got sick, I had to take time off. By the time I was ready to go back, the firm had downsized, and my position was gone. Then the economy tanked, and well." He shrugged. "The diner hired me the same day I applied." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "And you never tried to get back into engineering?" James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what time? Between working doubles at the diner and taking care of Ethan, I barely have time to sleep, let alone job hunt in a field that's moved on without me." They walked in silence for a while after that, the only sounds the splashing of their feet through puddles and the occasional giggle from the girls as they jumped in particularly tempting ones. James found himself wondering about Catherine. She was clearly wealthy, her casual mention of a driver and the address in Oakwood Heights confirmed that, but there was no wedding ring on her finger, and she hadn't mentioned a husband. As if reading his thoughts, Catherine said, "My husband died 5 years ago. Car accident." "I'm sorry," James said, meaning it. He knew all too well the hollow feeling of losing a spouse, of having to be strong for children who didn't fully understand why one parent was never coming home again. "Thank you," she replied. "It was hard at first, especially with 4 daughters to raise alone. But we've found our way." James nodded. Found their way to wealth and comfort, apparently. He tried not to feel bitter about the unfairness of it all, how some single parents struggled to put food on the table while others lived in mansions, but it was difficult not to make comparisons. As they approached Oakwood Heights, the streets widened, the sidewalks became immaculate, and the houses grew more imposing. Finally, they stopped before a large iron gate set into a stone wall that seemed to stretch for blocks. "This is us," Catherine said, pressing her thumb to a discreet scanner beside the gate. It swung open silently, revealing a winding driveway that led to a house so large James could only call it a mansion. "You live here?" he asked, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Catherine smiled. "It's too big for just the 5 of us, but it's been in my family for generations. Would you like to come in and dry off before heading home? I can have my driver take you back." James hesitated. He needed to get home to Ethan, but the thought of walking all the way back in the rain was daunting. And the offer of a ride was too practical to refuse. "That would be very kind, thank you," he said. Inside, the house was as grand as its exterior suggested, but surprisingly warm and lived in. Toys were scattered across an otherwise immaculate living room, and family photos lined the walls. Catherine sent the girls upstairs to change into dry clothes while a housekeeper brought James a towel and offered to dry his jacket. "Would you like some tea?" Catherine asked, leading him to a cozy study where a fire crackled in a stone fireplace. "Or something stronger?" "Tea would be great," James said, feeling increasingly out of place as he took in the leather-bound books lining the walls and the antique desk that probably cost more than his annual salary. As they waited for the tea, Catherine asked more about his engineering background. James found himself talking about his passion for sustainable design, the projects he'd worked on before Lisa got sick, the ideas he still had but no outlet for. Catherine listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that revealed she knew more about the field than he would have expected. "You know," she said as a maid brought in a tray with tea and small sandwiches, "I've been looking for someone with exactly your expertise." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh? I run Morgan Innovations," she said casually, as if she weren't mentioning one of the largest sustainable technology companies in the country. "We're expanding our building division, focusing on affordable, eco-friendly housing developments. We need someone who understands both the engineering and the human element." James nearly choked on his tea. "You're Catherine Morgan?" "The Catherine Morgan?" She smiled. "I don't usually lead with that. People tend to act differently when they know." James's mind raced. Morgan Innovations was revolutionary in the field of sustainable technology. Their projects were changing lives around the world, bringing clean water, renewable energy, and affordable housing to communities that desperately needed them. And Catherine Morgan, the brilliant mind behind it all, was sitting across from him, offering him tea in her study. "I'm not looking for charity," James said carefully. Catherine's expression hardened slightly. "I don't offer charity, Mr. Wilson. I make investments. You have the skills and experience my company needs. The fact that hiring you would help a dedicated father provide better for his son is a bonus, not the primary motivation." James felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply." Catherine waved away his apology. "No need. Pride is important. So is recognizing an opportunity when it presents itself." She leaned forward. "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring your resume and any portfolio materials you have. We'll have a proper interview, and if you're as good as I suspect you are, we'll discuss compensation and benefits." She smiled. "Including excellent health insurance that would cover your son's medication completely." James felt dizzy with the sudden turn his life had taken. Just hours ago, he'd been cleaning grease traps for extra cash. Now, he was being offered a chance to return to the career he loved, to provide properly for Ethan, to use his skills for something meaningful again. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why me? Why tonight?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to a photograph on her desk, a handsome man with her same kind eyes, his arm around a younger Catherine. "My husband was walking home in the rain the night he died," she said softly. "His car had broken down, and he decided to walk rather than wait for a tow. A driver didn't see him crossing the street." She looked back at James. "When I saw you tonight, willing to go out of your way to help strangers despite your own struggles, I saw the same kindness that defined David. The world needs more of that kindness, not less." James didn't know what to say. The weight of her loss, the magnitude of the opportunity she was offering, the sheer unlikelihood of their paths crossing, it was overwhelming. "I should get home to my son," he said finally. Catherine nodded and called for her driver. As they waited in the grand foyer, her daughters came bounding down the stairs, now dry and in fresh clothes. "Are you coming back to see us?" little Lily asked, looking up at James with those wide, innocent eyes. "I hope so," James replied, surprised to find he meant it. The driver appeared, keys in hand, and James prepared to leave. Catherine handed him a business card with her direct number. "Tomorrow at 10, she said. "Don't be late." James nodded, tucking the card carefully into his wallet. "I won't be." As the luxury car pulled away from the mansion, James felt as though he were in a dream. The rain had stopped, and the night sky had cleared, revealing stars that seemed to shine with new promise. He thought of Ethan, of the life they might now have, of the chance to show his son that perseverance and kindness could sometimes be rewarded in the most unexpected ways. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Ms. Morgan doesn't usually bring strangers home," he commented. "You must have made quite an impression." James smiled, thinking of the twist of fate that had led him to that awning, to that family caught in the rain. "I think we made impressions on each other," he said. When the car pulled up to his apartment building, James thanked the driver and stepped out into the night. The building looked the same, worn brick, flickering security light, graffiti on the side wall, but James felt different. Tomorrow held possibilities that hadn't existed this morning. He climbed the stairs to the third floor, his wet shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Mrs. Abernathy opened her door before he could knock. "There you are," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Ethan's been worried." "I'm sorry I'm late," James said. "Something unexpected came up." Mrs. Abernathy smiled knowingly. "Something good, by the look on your face." James nodded. "I think so. I really think so." Ethan was asleep on Mrs. Abernathy's couch, his favorite superhero action figure clutched in his small hand. James gently lifted him, thanked Mrs. Abernathy again, and carried his son back to their apartment. As he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy stirred. "Dad," he mumbled sleepily. "I'm here, buddy," James whispered. "Did you have a good day?" Ethan asked, his eyes already drifting closed again. James smoothed his son's hair back from his forehead. "I did. And I think tomorrow's going to be even better." The next morning, James woke early. He dug through his closet until he found his old interview suit, slightly outdated but still professional. He helped Ethan get ready for school, making pancakes as a special treat. "Why are you wearing your fancy clothes, Dad?" Ethan asked, syrup dripping down his chin. "I have a job interview," James replied, adjusting his tie. Ethan's eyes widened. "Are you going to be an engineer again?" James smiled, touched that his son remembered. He didn't talk about his old career often, it was too painful to dwell on what he'd lost, but he had shared stories of building designs and problem-solving challenges that had made Ethan declare engineering the coolest job ever. "Maybe," James said. "We'll see how the interview goes." After dropping Ethan at school, James made his way to the gleaming downtown tower that housed Morgan Innovations. The receptionist directed him to the top floor, where Catherine's assistant was waiting to escort him to her office. Catherine greeted him warmly, introducing him to her chief operating officer and the head of the building division. The interview was thorough but not intimidating. James found himself speaking passionately about his ideas, about the potential for truly sustainable, affordable housing that could transform communities. The executives asked challenging questions that pushed him to think on his feet, but their interest seemed genuine. After 2 hours, Catherine walked him out herself. "The team was impressed," she said. "So was I." "Thank you for the opportunity," James replied. Regardless of the outcome, it felt good to talk about engineering again. Catherine smiled. "The outcome, Mr. Wilson, is that we'd like to offer you a position as senior project manager for our new affordable housing initiative. The salary is competitive, the benefits comprehensive, and the work, I believe, will be deeply satisfying." James felt his knees go weak. Thank you. I accept." "Excellent," Catherine said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Morgan Innovations." As they shook hands, James couldn't help but ask the question that had been nagging at him. "Last night, when you asked me to walk you home, was that planned? Did you know who I was?" Catherine's smile turned enigmatic. "Let's just say I believe in fate, Mr. Wilson. And in recognizing good people when I meet them." In the weeks that followed, James's life transformed. The salary from Morgan Innovations allowed him to move Ethan to a safer neighborhood, closer to a good school. The health insurance covered all of Ethan's medical needs. The work challenged and fulfilled him in ways he'd almost forgotten were possible. He saw Catherine regularly at work, their professional relationship marked by mutual respect and occasional friendly debates about design approaches. Her daughters sometimes visited the office after school, and Lily in particular seemed to have taken a shine to James, often asking him detailed questions about how buildings stayed standing or why some materials were stronger than others. 6 months after that rainy night, Catherine invited James and Ethan to dinner at her home. It was the first social invitation she'd extended, and James accepted with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. The dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Ethan and Catherine's daughters hit it off immediately, disappearing to play in the vast backyard while the adults talked. As they sat on the terrace watching the children, Catherine turned to James. "I have a confession to make," she said, her voice soft. "That night we met wasn't entirely coincidental." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh? I'd heard about you," she explained. "From one of your former colleagues who now works for me. He mentioned a brilliant engineer who'd left the field to care for his family. When I learned you were working at the diner, I wanted to meet you, to see for myself what kind of man you were." "So you staged being stranded in the rain?" James asked, unsure whether to be amused or offended. Catherine shook her head. "The rain was real. The driver's emergency was real. But I could have called a car service. I chose to ask for help instead, to see how a man with his own burdens would respond to someone else in need." James was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. "And if I'd said no? If I'd been too tired or too focused on getting home to Ethan?" "I would have understood completely," Catherine said. "And found another way to meet you. But the fact that you said yes, that you put others before yourself even when it wasn't easy, that told me everything I needed to know about your character." James watched as Ethan laughed, chasing the Morgan girls across the lawn.